represents a fast-developing industry underpinned by data-dependent technologies. Through innovation in FinTech, the financial industry as a whole is evolving and adopting new technologies and data-intensive practices. Much of the innovation led by FinTechs is underpinned by artificial intelligence and data-driven technologies. But beyond the FinTech industry, recent years have witnessed a number of high-profile controversies around data misuse and AI, which have focused attention at the need to pursue ethical approaches to digital innovation. In particular, there is significant interest in ensuring that AI is developed and deployed in ways that are responsible, fair, and trustworthy. So in this breakout session, we're going to consider what this means for the FinTech industry, and the panel are going to discuss some of the approaches needed to ensure ethical and socially acceptable innovation in finance. The session will discuss cutting-edge research being conducted at Newcastle University relating to FinTech and how public trust can be established in new financial technologies. They will present findings from 3 studies, which are part of the EPSRC-funded FinTrust project. The 3 presentations will explore, firstly, technical approaches for measuring and evaluating fairness in automated processes, for example, applications of AI in financial decision-making. Secondly, individuals' preferences for using AI-powered financial services, in particular discussing findings from the study into customer trust chatbots for financial advice. And finally, how to establish a social license for digital innovation in finance. This will reflect on sociological research to consider the conditions needed to ensure new financial products and services are socially acceptable. The session will discuss ethical, social, and technical aspects of FinTech and consider the importance of these for the future growth and sustainability of the FinTech industry. The panelists for Newcastle University are as follows. There is Karen Elliott. Karen, do you want to put your hand up? You've probably got your name on the screen anyway. Ehsan Toreini, Kabila Kopamutu, and
no, we've had a slight change, Dawn.
I've just realised. Magdelane now.
Kabila's had an emergency, so she can't join us. So Magdelane is kindly going to step in because she worked on the paper with Kabila.
Thank you, Magdelane. I should have looked at there instead. That's the perils of having a bit of paper, isn't it? Your eyes on the screen. And Mhairi, thank you very much, Mhairi. And I will turn off my camera now and watch you discuss this because it sounds great.
Okay, are we ready now?
So is it still the same sort of thing? It's first Mhairi and then Magdelane and then me?
No, I'm going to change it to, because the way Dawn's reading that out,
exactly,
she's doing it the other way around. So I'm going to do you, Ehsan,
no problem,
then Magdelane, and then Mhairi, because that's the way you've done it on your paper. So when Dawn introduces us,
yeah, exactly. That's why I asked this.
Yeah, she's changed it, so she's read it off that. So we may as well just follow that.
No problem.
So I think we get pulled in a second. So
sure.
I think you just kind of go ahead without me now, Karen.
I thought it didn't start till 25 too.
Let's just go ahead. I think we're on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. Look at that time. It's 25 too. Okay. So I'm Karen Elliott, and I'm a co-lead of the FinTrust project. So today I've got here as 3 research associates who work on the project with me. So as Nick, who's one of our colleagues who leads the National Innovation Centre for Ageing, in the plenary speech this morning, talked about aging and trust, we're centering on trust and ethics and how we get trustworthy technology. Because a few of you may be aware that there's a black box problem, i.e. there are a lot of algorithms that are used, particularly in financial services, to make decisions about who gets access to certain services. People can't actually explain how the algorithm comes to that point. Therefore, there's questions around is it ethical to use these algorithms? How does that give a good service and open up financial services across the board? So we've got 3 sections to our FinTrust project. First, we're going to have Ehsan, who's going to talk about the chain of trust that we developed on the technological side. Then we're going to move to Magdelane, who's looking at how we can make technology more approachable, more on an emotionally intelligent bot. So he's going to talk around the first steps into the experiments of those. And finally, Mhairi, who you'll see later doing a blame it on the algorithm, is going to talk us through the concept of establishing a social license to operate in the fintech area. So again, that's sort of looking across the demographic of aging, like how can we get communities aware and engage with the fintech process. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ehsan, who's going to talk to you about the technological side of a chain of trust.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for attending this talk. In this talk, my colleagues will talk about trust issues from social and psychological point of view. But in my talk, I will discuss the required technologies to enhance trust in machine learning algorithm. And first, I would like to discuss what do we mean by trust. In computer science, we use trust in various ways. For example, when we use the word TPM as trusted platform module, we mainly imply security. And in a specific case of machine learning, depending on the expertise of the computer scientist, the definition of trust is different. For example, cybersecurity experts normally focus on privacy preserving and secure technologies. Activists mainly focus on ethical issues, and machine learning engineers normally focus on accuracy and efficiency. And moreover, there are confusion in terminology of the concepts as well. For example, ethical machine learning is used in place of trustworthy machine learning. But then it comes to this question, do we really consider a machine learning model trustworthy if it's non-discriminative, but it's not accurate at the same time? So there is actually a very kind of like complicated definition that we should present for trustworthy machine learning. And in this research, we try to answer two key questions. First, how people trust the technology. And second, what qualities or what technologies are required to make machine learning trustworthy. And for that, we first focus on social science, the frameworks that are presented in social sciences for social trust concepts. And based on the literature in social science, technological qualities should reflect four aspects: ability, benevolence, integrity, and predictability, or in short, ABI and ABI plus frameworks. And we look into the literature from computer science to find the trustworthy elements based on these four principles. And in our review of the literature, we noticed two main approaches. First, what we call principled AI frameworks. These are high-level approach documents that normally targets policymakers, governments, and industries. And second is technological solutions, which they focus on low-level approaches and try to propose solutions for a small set of problems. And they usually target computer scientists, developers, machine learning engineers, and people with technical backgrounds generally. And when we analyzed these two approaches comprehensively, and we analyzed almost 32 principled AI frameworks and a very large number of technical solutions, and we concluded four technological qualities are required for a trustworthy machine learning solution. And I feel the urge to emphasize that these qualities are beyond accuracy and efficiency. So accuracy and efficiency is the main precondition for any working machine learning model. And we named these trustworthy technologies as FIS technologies, standing for fairness technologies, explainability technologies, auditability technologies, and safety technologies. And in our investigation, all the principled AI frameworks cover these technologies. But when it comes to the details, they are massively confusing and very much different in terms of definition and scope of each of these technologies. And in the review of the FIS-related technical solutions, we realized there normally focus and function in the scope of a few stages if you look at from machine learning pipelines point of view. And we recognize two main category of solutions in technical fees solutions. The first is data-related trust, which they focused on data collection, feature engineering, and training and testing and validation data sets. And second is model-related trust solutions, which they mainly focused on how we train the model, how we test the model, and how we can deploy the machine learning model trustworthily. And at the end, we propose an outlook how we can implement these fees technologies based on the idea of trust propagation. And trust propagation implies that trust gradually propagates in machine learning, and engineers and developers should consider fees technologies from the early stages in the pipeline. I'm saying data collection and feature engineering until the deployments and afterwards. And we call this concept as chain of trust in our paper. And these outlook chain of trust has a few benefits. First, the decisions that we make at each stage impact the other stages. So consideration of trust should be there from the start until the end. Second, machine learning algorithms have an iterative nature, so underestimation of trust could have a snowball effect on the final product. And having that outlook as chain of trust gives the engineers and developers the opportunity to respond to accidents and sudden breakouts of trust effectively. And finally, for conclusion, I would like to highlight the findings that we have. First, trustworthy machine learning technologies have been subject to various interpretations. For example, in a specific case of fairness, there are at least 20 mathematical definitions of fairness in the literature, and it's mathematically proved that you cannot fulfill all of them simultaneously. So when it comes to the implementation, there is a question, what definition should we choose, how we can implement it, and what combination is the best for our problem, which is very confusing when it comes to the implementation. And second, trustworthy technologies in different stages of machine learning impact one another in the next stages. So we should have a trust-focused outlook in all the stages, a concept that we coined as chain of trust. And finally, there is a huge gap between approaches in the definition of trustworthy machine learning. And we urge all machine learning experts to gain a deeper understanding of the social trust and how technologies impact it. And I now conclude my talk, and thanks everyone for listening.
Okay, so just a little bit of summarize what Ehsan's got on there. What we're focusing on is how to give you a pathway to actually make trustworthy technology. We're still working on this and developing it throughout. So one of the outputs from the project will be an ethical toolkit that can be distributed across all tech sectors. So that's one of the outcomes. I'm now going to turn to my colleague Magdelane, who's going to talk to us through a very interesting piece of work on chatbots.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to try to share my screen so that you can see my slides. So let's see if this works. Does it work? It's not sharing. It's not sharing. You can't see can't see my slides, right?
No.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm just going to speak without slides then. Yeah, so my colleague, Dr. Kavila Kupamotu, who couldn't be here today, and we decided to dabble at this from a different angle. And Ehsan just now gave a really good introduction to this. Basically, the main question that we wanted to try to answer is, how do we design chatbots for finance in the context of finance that would make people trust it more? So that's the overarching large research question that we had. And the four main sort of variables that we were interested in to look at is humanizing the chatbots. So we had this idea that if we humanize chatbots, And I'll go into that in a little bit. Would that make people trust it more? Would that make people use it more? Would that make people have less of a privacy concern and therefore use it more as well? So we wanted to look at the interplay between humanizing chatbots, whether this increases usage or intention to use in our case in this little study, trust and privacy concern. So what we did was we designed 2 different chatbot vignettes. And of course, the next step is to actually implement an actual chatbot prototype. But for now, we inducted this with 2 vignettes. So by vignettes, we mean that we gave our participants a little blurb, a little excerpt for them to read and to familiarize themselves, and then gave them a bunch of questionnaires to measure their level of trust, their level of intention to use the chatbot, as well as what privacy concerns that they have. So the 2 different blurbs was, one, we had a very basic chatbot. We gave it a robotic name. We gave it XRO23. So this robot, we kept it very simple. We just made it mechanical and technical. And the features in these were that you would expect from any chatbot to help you with financial services. So we gave it attributes such as it's easy to use. You are in charge, you're in control of it. So you can pull out anytime you want. It's secure, it's private, it's safe, it's speedy, it saves you time, it's predictable, it's flexible, and it's given to you by a bank you already trust. So all these traits, we gave it to XRO23. And then we created another excerpt, which we sort of imbued humanness into. And the way we did this was by giving it 5 features that XRO23 didn't have. So number 1, we gave it a human name. So we called it Emma. Emma, female name, nice, very inviting, not threatening. We gave her also the quality of politeness. Again, when I say we gave it, I mean we simply wrote in the excerpt, the blurb in the vignette, that she's polite. And we also gave her the quality of personalization. So this means that she will call you by your name, like whatever you want to be called, not just, an XRO doesn't do this, Emma does. So she can personalize to whatever you want her to call you. She does chit chat, she does small talk, she takes a turn in speaking to you. She also understands your feelings. Now, this one's a big one. We wanted to put this in so that this chatbot would seem like it understands human conversation, so basic emotional intelligence of understanding your feelings. So let's say you have a bad day and you go to Emma, who is your personal financial advisor chatbot, and you go, how much do I get to save today? And she says, well, you've not been doing very well this month, so you need to cut back. And you're not feeling very, very good about it because you've not been saving much this month. And then what she does is she encourages you. She gives you encouraging statements like, you're doing great, carry on. So she gives you these encouraging statements and quips to keep you going, like a human would, like a human financial advisor would. And this is the biggest comparison to XRO23. So now that I've explained these excerpts, we gave these to randomly to 400 participants in total. So 200 participants viewed Emma, read Emma, and another 200 read XRO23. We basically wanted to look at, does perceived humanness, so do people perceive Emma to be more human? And how does that impact their level of trust? Did it increase it? Did it decrease? No change? And and then also intention to use the chatbots for financial purposes. We also wanted to look at what type of financial information people are comfortable in disclosing. So what kind of financial information, such as credit card number, account number, sort code number. So these are credit card financial information that you have to give when you're dealing with a financial advisor, automated financial advisor, sorry. And for what task are users, participants, comfortable with the chatbot assisting and for it to be automated? So for example, are people comfortable with Emma or XRO23 checking their bank balance, tracking their expenses and spending patterns, making payments and money transfers automatically without them looking over and doing it themselves, basically. Setting up spending budgets, creating prompts for bills, linking their bank account with the chatbot, growing their money and making financial investments for them. So these are the kinds of tasks, financial tasks we ask our participants, whether you're comfortable with this chatbot excerpt that we've given you, to be comfortable taking over. And so what we found was quite interesting and also quite muddied. And we did not get a clear-cut, yes, people are liking Emma, yes, people are liking XRO. We got a little bit of insight into it. So the one big thing that we found was people were significantly more likely to disclose financial information, like credit card information, like account number, sort code, account balance, to XRO23 compared to Emma. And they were more likely to want to report their lost or stolen card to XRO23 compared to Emma. So we're not seeing very much love for Emma in financial tasks. However, we found that people did perceive Emma to be more human, and people did, it did affect perceived humanness, did affect level of trust. So one thing we tried to digest this information from this little study, this vignette study that we have, is that maybe when we do design a chatbot prototype and we do carry that out, the results will be more stark and it will be easier to understand. And this is a very complex topic, and this is just a little dip in the water, this study, and we hope that in the coming year we will carry out more and more studies to help us dig our feet in and understand what makes people trust chatbot more. Yeah, so that's it for me.
Thanks, Magdalena. So like I said, there's quite a few questions coming in, and one was interesting from Dawn Dunn, who said there might be that element of judgment coming in, and we sort of saw a hint of that with Emma. That could be an explanation, that because Emma was perceived to be more human, she might judge your financial expenditure, if you're gambling, etc., whereas XR023 was just mechanical. But again, we're at early stages, so bear with us. We need to explore this a bit more. Mm-hmm. So great, thanks, Magdalena, and thanks for the questions and the comments. Now I'm going to turn to Mhairi, who is now going to wrap up the session by talking about the trust and the concept of social license to operate for FinTech. In essence, being more ethical and using tech for good. So I'll pass over to Mhairi.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, so I'm Mhairi Aitken. I'm a Senior Research Associate in Newcastle University Business School, working on the FinTrust project. I'm a sociologist, so my interests around this area are very much around kind of social and ethical issues in relation to FinTech and digital innovation more broadly. So working with Karen on the social science part of this project, we're looking at what the kind of social and ethical issues are around FinTech and around digital innovation in finance. and particularly looking to identify what the kind of ethical considerations might be, how we can anticipate what those are, and then develop approaches to address those within FinTech and within innovation in this field. So the title of my section of this talk was, how can we establish a social license for FinTech? And so I'm going to, in the next 10 minutes, say a bit about what that means. What is a social license? How does that apply to FinTech? And how might we get there? What might we have to do to establish a social license? So I need to start just a little bit of rationale, kind of back into why we're interested in this. And as I think probably many of you are aware, over the last, say, 5 years or so, there's been a really considerable increase in interest around data ethics and ethical AI. This is at least partly, not entirely, but partly as a result of some fairly high-profile public controversies around data use or data misuse and abuse, and also controversies around the role that AI plays within society. So perhaps the most high-profile controversy, the most high-profile example would be the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal a few years ago, and also other examples such as Google DeepMind's involvement in NHS. These kinds of controversies have really brought a lot of public interest and public data practices and of the role of AI across a number of different sectors. That's led to a really significant increase in interest in this area, and we've seen that there's been a lot of investment in this, a lot of investment in research, a lot of policy interest, ethical AI and data ethics using big data. That's led to the creation of new think tanks, new research institutions focusing on this area. But also within business, there's been a really significant drive towards adopting principles like digital ethics, ethical policies. And we see that in a number of businesses across a range of industries, including FinTech, that data ethics, ethical AI has become a really core focus for many of these industries and different businesses. And so we're really thinking about what does that mean in practice, and how do we move beyond principles to digital ethics or ethical principles and put that into practice within industry and within the controversies around data ethics and controversies around AI have really focused attention at the need for securing legitimacy of the ways that we use data and the importance of public acceptability of the ways that data are collected and used or reused in the future, and of the role of AI in society and industry. And that brings us on to the idea of a social license. So essentially what this means is that we need to establish a social license for current and future data practices. So what is a social license? Well, first thing is that a social license is about aligning with public values or society's expectations of how an industry should operate, or in this case, how data should be used or how AI should be used. But what's important to say is that a social license is not the same as legal compliance. So when we're thinking about data for ethical AI, of course, we have to comply with the law. Of course, you have to use data in ways that comply with regulation. And that's a must, that's a given, right? But ethical practice often implies going beyond legal compliance. So compliance with the law isn't enough to be for ethical practice or to be socially acceptable or to have a license. So often, in order to be socially acceptable, we need to go beyond legal compliance and think about what more we need to do in order to comply with society's expectations, public expectations of an organisation of how data should be used, how AI should be used. So we're interested in thinking about what it means to have a social license for FinTech or to have a social license for digital innovation in the financial sector. Importantly, a social license is based on relationships of trust. So how do we establish trust in relation with stakeholders? And here I want to stress that we're not thinking about stakeholders narrowly just as customers. So we're not just thinking about FinTech's customers or people who might use a new financial service, but much more broadly, the public as stakeholders. And I really am talking about the public because when we think about innovation in FinTech or innovation in the financial sector, this is a sector that really affects everybody across society. So even people who aren't using new digital services are impacted by the expansion of services because they change the financial sector as a whole. For example, when we're talking about cashless societies, the move towards cashless societies, that is a transformation which will affect everybody, not just those who initially adopt new digital services or cashless. So we're thinking very broadly about impacts on society and how we can engage more widely with broader stakeholders in ethical practices. So this is about establishing relationships, and it's about identifying what are public expectations, what are the kind of public values or societal values that we need to align with within FinTech in order to be public and in order to develop ethical practice. So again, I want to stress that in this research, we're not just thinking about customer responses, and I think often in terms of ethical practice or thinking about how we identify whether we're addressing public concerns or aligning with public interest, there's often a temptation to focus on customer uptake. So there's often an argument that if a product is successful, if a new service is successful, if there's a large customer uptake or customer retention of that service, then it must be kind of okay. But actually, there's wider social issues that we need to look beyond just the customer's responses to wider societal responses to know if we really are aligning with public expectations and public values and thinking beyond just customer experiences more broadly. So to do this, we need a range of different approaches. Ehsan has already outlined some of the technical approaches that are currently being used in machine learning to address ethical considerations and to address the challenges around fairness and trust in machine learning. And these technical approaches go some way to understanding or to address these ethical challenges. But clearly, we also need to think about social approaches and social mechanisms through which to do this. If we're thinking about establishing public trust, building public trust within these new services and new products within FinTech, it's clear that technical approaches will only go some of that way. So technical approaches might aim to demonstrate competence or demonstrate integrity within those processes. But the extent to which members of the public or stakeholders accept those messages or have confidence in the message that are conveyed depend on the extent to which they trust the organizations or the individuals who are communicating those messages. So we need to think not just about how we the technical competencies and the technical mechanisms to build ethical approaches, but also the social mechanisms through which we're communicating those and the social approaches to build relationships that underpin trust. So in FinTrust, that's what we're looking at, and we're trying to think about the different approaches that might be needed to establish trust and to address. So what have we found so far? I'm going to very briefly outline some. I guess in the comments, some people are finding it hard to hear. I'm going to keep going because I don't know what the problem is. So I apologise for that.
Yeah, I don't think we can resolve it, Mhairi. Unfortunately, I'll just have to keep going.
Okay, I'm going to go a couple more minutes, and I just want to outline some of our findings so far in terms of what we found around social acceptability and public responses to FinTech. So between September and December of last year, we ran a series of 5 focus groups to begin looking at some of these issues and I should say to begin looking beyond customer responses to kind of wider public responses and public acceptability of digital finance. This is a very preliminary first overview of some of the kind of headline results that come out of this. What we found, firstly, probably won't surprise anybody, we found that people really want to think about banking. Not something they want to talk about in the day-to-day course. It's not something they want to engage with or think about. They just want it to fit in. They want it to be easy. And that's not surprising. I mean, there's a lot of attention in development of new services and making frictionless services, making things easy, making things convenient. We kind of know that people also are mostly quite supportive of the idea of AI being used in ways that increase efficiency or increase accessibility of banking services. Again, that's seen as something very positive and something which has convenience to their own lives. So we know that these kinds of things which increase efficiency, increase accessibility, or remove friction within banking services are likely to lead to uptake. But what's interesting is that alongside the same people who had those kinds of responses that were quite about the convenience of new services were also very concerned about potential impact of those services. So people were very concerned about potential role of AI to be used in decision-making within finance. And it was really important for most people in our focus groups to stress the importance of human oversight and human accountability. So AI could be a decision support tool, but people don't really like the idea of AI making decisions that impact. People were also really worried about the potential societal impact of increasing automation within finance. And particularly, people were concerned that if AI increasingly played roles in customer service, or in decision making within finance that might reduce human capacities and human skills within those areas. So further down the line, it might be difficult for humans to make responsible decisions or to make sound judgment about either their personal finances or those working in the financial sector to make financial judgments. So people had concerns that were not about individual interests or individual privacy or impacts on individuals, but much more societal level concerns and the potential long-term impact, transformative impact of digital innovation and technology. And I think that's really interesting because it draws attention to the difference between talking to people as customers and how they might use a technology or use a new service, and talking to people as members of society who are interested in ethical impact or concerned about impact of technology and innovation. And again, that draws attention to the importance of the concept of a social license and looking more broadly than customer acceptance, so much more widely. What are the implications for society, and how, and to what extent can we reflect public values and social values within the development of new technology and new financial services? So that's a kind of run through of some of the interest in this area, and I'll be interested to discuss or hear comments or questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mhairi and Magdelane and Ehsan. We can see we're really passionate about this because we can see the impact of FinTech on society, and some of the other work connected to that is we're looking at explainable AI and algorithms, and we're also looking at financial regulation and what state-of-the-art tools and solutions will come out of that. There's a little bit of interference. I don't know if anybody else is getting it. I don't know where it's coming from, so apologies for that. But if you want to find us or you want to find out more about FinTrust, then please just drop us a line, or you can find us on the Helix in the Computer Science Building when it's online, or just look at our emails at the moment until we get back in situ. But if anybody's got any more questions, just feel free to ask. We've got a few moments left. I want to just give a shout out to Aitken Bank as well, because they're our industry partner throughout the whole project. So they've been liaising with us to give us insights. And as I said, the output from these projects will be the emotionally intelligent chatbot and also an ethics toolkit, which can be used across all technology, we open source, etc. And Aitken have just helped us to sort of co-create it and what will be really useful. Okay, I think, has anybody got anything to add from the team? Oh,
We have a question. Oh.
Do you have any statistics on computer pre and post bot employment? We haven't actually deployed the bot as yet. We're looking into different types of bots, such as Watson Assistant. We're looking at connected to a couple of companies who already have some bots in development and seeing what we can exchange knowledge with them. But we haven't deployed it yet. Dave, who's in the comments here, and Kavila and Magdelane and ourselves have been looking at doing a prototype. So once we do start deploying, we'll let you know. Okay, thank you. Anybody else has got any questions, feel free. Otherwise, I would remind you to tune in and just over a time when Mhairi will be doing blame on the algorithm. You need to watch out for kangaroos. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.